It is indeed time to get the discussions going this Monday night. And the European Union has often been compared to a dysfunctional family. But some are saying today the bloc is more divided and more unpopular than ever before. Well, the latest spat involves Italy and France, currently locked in a bitter dispute over immigration. Well, yesterday France blocked trains at the border after Italy granted some 25,000 Tunisian refugees the right to roam across the EU. Well, France says Italy is trying to pass the buck. Italy says France and the EU are shirking their responsibilities. Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi went one step further. He said Italy might be better off quitting the Union altogether. Well, all of this is hardly the spirit of cooperation conceived some 60 years ago, but combine that with the success of several far-right anti-European political parties, and you might be tempted to wonder if Berlusconi is merely voicing the thoughts of many people across Europe. Tonight, I'll be asking if European policy on immigration has failed, if economic, social and foreign policies are doing any better, and would European nations be better off alone? Well, joining me in the studio to discuss, Mathilde Bouillet is from the left-leaning think tank Terra Nova. Craig Capitas is a senior writer for Bloomberg News. Frédéric Vial is a member of the organisation Attack and the author of this book, L'Horreur Européenne, which we decided translates roughly as the European Nightmare, am I right?
Yes, why not?
Why not? The European Nightmare. There you are. There's the cover right there. And I'm also joined by Ali Fatemi, who's a professor of finance at the American Graduate School of Economics here in Paris. Many thanks indeed to you all for being with us tonight. Well, let's start with the French-Italian dispute over Europe. Let's have a quick listen to what the Italian foreign minister had to say this weekend. They should be able to see that coming up now. He said that Europe and Brussels and the French were all shirking their responsibilities. No, we can't have a look at that. All right, there we are. OK, I know each country has its own worries concerning the domestic policies. Europe requires freedom of movement across borders. If we start erecting walls, Europe can't go anywhere. We should instead maintain that France and Italy have a European future together and that they must work together. Well, Italy, of course, has been overwhelmed by some 25,000 refugees from Tunisia in the past few weeks. Meanwhile, the French Interior Minister hit back. He said France was well within its rights to turn back the Tunisians.
The train traffic between France and Italy was effectively interrupted yesterday for the simple reason that there were people on the train coming to demonstrate in France. The issue of public order was therefore at stake.
Craig Capitas, I'll start with you. Now, the EU says France hasn't in fact broken any rules. France wrote a letter to the officials there. But who's shirking their responsibilities here? Who's not doing the right thing?
Well, I'll go back a step. Where's Europe supposed to be going? The only place Europeans ever went was the United States. Europe is not a melting pot, never has been, never will be. And what you're seeing here is down and dirty, basic tribalism 101. Every man for themselves. The problem with this tribalism is that it lends itself to the far right, which is kind of dangerous. But the way the global economy is right now, and the fact that there's too few services for too many people, Europe doesn't have the space, it doesn't have the room, it doesn't have the money.
It doesn't have the jobs.
It doesn't have the jobs. And on top of that, where does this idea come? I mean, this was the great European myth, that Europe was a country. Europe is not a country. To have a country, you have to have a central bank, you have to have elected officials, you have to have a Federal Reserve type thing. Europe is an amalgamation of states that even when they weren't amalgamated, never welcomed anyone. People left Europe, and they are still leaving. So I think you have to go back 3 steps here.
How would you respond to that, Mathilde Bouillet? Do you think Europe's got to the point where it's just not working anymore?
I think this France-Italy struggle just reflects both two components of the European disease, a lack of vision and a lack of leadership. Actually, I think this too restrictive approach of migration and this kind of speeches are just political intern manipulation, both in Italy and in France. Actually, the EU is in crisis. That's completely true. And Europeans are going through a very deep and global crisis. Europe faces low growth for decades. The European social model is endangered. And Europeans have also to face a strong environmental crisis. And Europe as a whole is quite marginalized in the international scene. So the consequences of that is quite logically the upsurge of far right and populism. And Sarkozy, as Berlusconi, are trying to exploit, to manipulate this trend. So the EU is in a bad sequence, but I think, and I'm convinced, that the EU is not the problem, but the solution. And we need stronger political policy makers to grasp the opportunity, because now we see that the EU can't go on with national egoism, and so we need just more integration and more solidarity.
We need more integration. We need a more integrated immigration policy. I mean, 25,000 people have come from North Africa, mainly Tunisia, in the last few weeks. If they were dispersed around Europe more cohesively, it wouldn't be so overwhelming, would it?
Well, just before the emission, we were asking us if we could find between us some kind of agreement. And I'm very agree of what just has been said just now, because, in fact, we had the manipulation from the French government on this issue. And the question and the solution could be more Europe. And, well, in anti-globalization movement, we are fighting for more Europe. But we have to say that the solution is not the Europe as it is now, as it is built now. The solution is for another Europe,
in
not
terms of
this
how its
one.
Institutions are built at the moment?
Well, in terms of institution and most in terms of policies, because we do not have to be astonished of the rising of the far right, because, well, most of the people are looking at what are doing the governments in all over Europe, and they have to make a constat to no, not to prove. They just see that the government is always doing the same thing, even it is in right or even it's supposed to be in left. There is no protection against bad effect of globalization, and that is one of the roots of the rising of far right. And this has to be changed, and the policies, the global policy and not economic policy in Europe must change if we do not want to see once again and again the rise of the far right.
Well, this is the worrying byproduct of this disillusionment with Europe, isn't it, Ali Fatimi? The rise of the far right. We've seen it in the Netherlands, we've seen it in Britain, we've seen it, of course, in France, we're seeing it all across Europe. And the true Finns, Finland's far right party, got nearly 20% of the vote this weekend. This is a worrying trend, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't see this any different than the Tea Party in the States. Mm-hmm. This basically, there are people, I mean, you are labeling them as left or right or center and so on. These are just citizens. These are people who have concerns, and their concerns have to be listened to. The fact that 25,000 came now, you're saying distribute them among the European nations. What do you do with the next 250,000, with the next million? You know, Europe cannot absorb everyone who wants to come from Africa. I mean, this is to be idealistic and so on. You're not being true to yourself. Mm-hmm. The fact is that there's a limit to what Europe can absorb.
And do you think European political leaders are worried about saying that, are concerned about saying that to the public? And they haven't managed to come up with a cohesive policy between them.
They get labelled as extreme right or this. Mm-hmm. They're elected to do a job. And when they don't do the job, they're out. The leaders represent the people because they're the ones who put them in the office.
Yeah, there's an unsavory question here. Are the people who want to immigrate to Europe the people that the Europeans want to live here? And I would suggest to you, by far, the answer is no, as politically incorrect as that might sound. It goes back to this concept of tribalism and what Europe is. For better or for worse, the United States was very good at acculturating all of the foreigners who came to the United States. Yes, there were problems galore, but they were pretty much solved, which is why the United States is known as the melting pot. For any European politician to stand up and suggest that Europe is a melting pot shows me he got a pretty bad grade in history when he was back at university, let alone primary school. It's not, and you can't sell it. And the professor, I believe, is absolutely right here. People are expressing what's on their mind. You have the burqa crisis here in France, which is a failure of acculturation. You have similar crises in the UK, in Germany, in Spain, in Italy. There's a point where you have to stop singing Kumbaya, we are going to be one nation for all. It doesn't work that way. If it did, then you could build Christian churches in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, which you can't. And I don't know how you get around this very real political problem is the moment any politician talks reality, they get branded as a far right demagogue, But
the British Prime Minister was the last to come out, wasn't he, David Cameron? He said multiculturalism just isn't working, and he was pounced on by the press. Do you think this is a problem? You can't make a policy if you can't talk about what the problem is in the first place.
No, it's a huge change, but I think the focus on migration and the Islamophobia is just a very sad and quite logical consequences of the global crisis. Because for me, it's a symptom of decline, and it's exactly what we have to avoid. So to give trust to citizens and to promote a more open Europe, we have actually to tackle real challenges, and the real challenges are social, economical. Because if you look at the immigration rates, actually France is not a so open country. We are less open than Germany and other European countries. So it's not the key issue. It's a political manipulation, as we said. It's quite logical, but Europe on migration has not a lot of room for maneuver, but we really need to go for all the different policies. Actually, what we need is to strengthen the European and Monetary Union, because one of the main lessons of the crisis is that this union is not working because it is unbalanced, unachieved. We have a monetary.
How can we strengthen monetary union? Because a lot of countries at the moment are talking about abandoning the euro with everything that's going on.
That would be a very bad option for the economy. Actually, the inflation will increase dramatically, and it would be very bad for our exports, and our situation in the context of the oil prices are going up. So the end of the euro is just the worst solution. So what we need actually is to strengthen the economic governance of the EU. Some options are on the table. The last European Council have adopted some measures, but they are still insufficient. Because what we see is the governments still remain focused on their own agendas. So we can't have with the euro a lack of economic cooperation. So we go to need further.
And then we're talking more about political integration, aren't we? But what about the people sitting at home with 25 million people unemployed across the 27-member bloc at the moment? There is very high unemployment, and people are seeing their tax their tax money going to bail out other countries.
That's the problem. You can't, on the one hand, say that Greece or France or any European country can do as it wishes, raise taxes, do everything which is not sound from an economic point of view, and when they get into trouble, come and ask money from Germany or from Finland or from... You can't do that. You can't... Right now, there's no way, in my opinion, and I say that and I go on record, there's no way for Greece to get out of this mess. Mm-hmm. Even if it restructures, it creates more problems. Greece did not belong